Listen-only mode.
Hello, good afternoon everybody. Hope you are all well and welcome to our practical procurement webinar. This month it's on telephony, so it's looking at how to get the best value from your school calls and line rental contracts. Delighted to have Michael Minto join us today from Southern Communications. Southern Communications is one of the suppliers that Minerva often recommends to our clients, and they're very well versed in this particular subject area. So you'll be pleased to know it's not a sales pitch from Michael. He's got some very, very useful information to impart across to you. But as I say, they are indeed one of our recommended suppliers, which is one of the reasons I've chosen them to speak today. A couple of housekeeping points. With regard to questions, we'd be delighted to take questions at the end of the webinar, and the way that you can do that is on your screens you will see a little box where it says questions, and if you would like to ask a question at any point, just type your question into the box. That will appear on my screen here at my end, and then I will put those to Michael, or it may be a question for myself at the end. Also, the webinar is being recorded, so for those people that haven't made it today, then this will be available at a later date, hopefully later this afternoon or tomorrow, so you'll be able to listen at your leisure, or again, if you're on the call today but you want to actually be able to listen back to it, then you'll have the ability to do that. So one quick thing before I hand over to Michael is just to explain about Minerva and who we are, for those of you that don't know. We're a procurement consultancy and we work exclusively with schools. We look at any area of spend, so we do look at anything as diverse as oil and energy, through to exercise books, photocopiers, and as we're talking about today, phones. So what we do is not rocket science, I always say, but we really, where I think we really help is with freeing up your time, because the projects that we do can be quite time consuming for people if you're starting from scratch, and so we can help you by circumventing a lot of the work that would need to be done. So that's a little bit about Minerva and what we do. What we'll now do is hand over to Michael, and he'll take you through the first part of this presentation.
Excellent. Thanks, Lorraine, and good morning, everybody. As Lorraine said, my name is Michael Minto. I work for a company called Southern Communications, and today's webinar is just based on finding the best solution for your school's telephony needs. A little bit about me. I've been at Southern Communications now for 3.5 years. Apologies, I'm having a bit of a technical glitch here. And in that time I've worked with the call charges and line rentals departments on not only just finding the best solutions for people, but actually getting the best value for your money as well. So apologies, let me just sort this out. So I've learned a lot about the industry in my time here, and actually what I've been able to do is not only accumulate the best apologies here, I'm not too sure what's happening.
Michael, I think if you press on the enable editing at the top and then click resume slideshow, it should work.
Yeah, apologies, just trying to get it sorted. I'm not entirely sure what's happened. 1 second. Excellent. Right, let's start again. Good morning, everybody. As I said, today's webinar is based on finding the best solution to your telephony needs. So there's a number of things that you can look out for to ensure that not only you're getting your best value for money, but also to make sure that you're picking the right supplier for you and actually knowing what it is that you should really be looking out for. So it can be a bit of a daunting prospect, which I fully appreciate, but actually with a little bit of information behind you, you may realise that this isn't as bad as first thought, and you'll know exactly what to look for with your telephony provider. So as I said, I've been at Southern Communications for 3.5 years. I'm the internal sales support manager here, and in that time I've picked up a number of things that I now know about the industry, which coming into the role, not knowing anything about telecoms, I would never have realised and quite frankly wouldn't have looked out for when choosing the best provider for my needs as well. So the first part of today's presentation is about BT. Who are BT exactly? The most common provider in the UK that we come across are BT. And I often ask people, why is it that you've stuck with BT since day one? You've stayed with them and not really looked to go elsewhere. And the most common response that you actually receive is, I like to be direct, with the company that own the infrastructure in the country. So it's, as I said, a bit of a common misconception, and it's not typically the case really. BT has been broken down into a number of different groups when government monopoly laws came into place, and the first of these is BT Openreach. Now you've probably seen their vans driving around, or a couple of their engineers hanging out of the exchange boxes, doing some fiddling and installing new lines. Now BT Openreach actually own the infrastructure in the country, so they're in charge of maintaining it, making sure your lines are working, and if you have a fault, they are the guys who come out and actually fix that for you as well. Now when people say they're using BT, they will not actually be using BT Openreach or BT Wholesale as are otherwise known. And this is simply because of government monopoly laws. So when the telecoms industry was privatised, it was set aside, BT bought the infrastructure, and at that point they were selling directly to the consumer, and they had a little bit of a monopoly on the country, if you will. So all prices were dictated by them. They could sell to the consumer at whatever price they wanted, and likewise, if anybody else would like to provide the services, they had to go to them, and quite often it would just be a case of being charged more than an actual consumer would, meaning that there wasn't a lot of competitiveness in the industry, as it wasn't in BT's interest to do so, in essence. So at this point, around about sort of 10 years ago, the government stepped in and they said, this is unfair, not only because you guys are getting the best share of the business in the country, but also because it's not really very competitive, and the consumer isn't getting the best value for their money. So they stepped in, separated BT into a number of different groups, the first of which being BT Openreach, who, as I mentioned, maintain the infrastructure in the country. Now what they actually did was set out a Chinese wall between Openreach and any other supplier, and they said to Openreach, you could no longer sell directly to the consumer. You have to sell to any reseller in the country, but the stipulation on this is that it must be at the same price to each provider, including BT Retail, who were formed at this point as a reseller for BT Openreach, but also if there are any faults on customers' lines or any issues that they have, everybody must receive the same response times, and there could be no advantage regardless of who you're using. It will solely come down to when the fault is logged. So that's a very important point to stress, really, because when people say they're using BT Retail, or that they're going directly to people on the lines, it is not actually the case. As you can see from this, you've got a number of different options. You've got BT Retail, a company like the one that I work for, Southern Communications, and then there's around 5,000 other resellers in the market. And as I said, we all buy at exactly the same price and receive the exact same response times should there be an issue. So the stipulation that I don't want to move from BT because I realise that I won't get the same service, it's just an old wives' tale that's kind of stuck. And really, if you look a little bit deeper, you may find that it's certainly worth reviewing your options and taking a look at this. So as I stressed, there's around 5,000 BT resellers in the country now, including BT Retail, and where we all buy for the same price, it's an extremely competitive market because nobody gains an advantage. It's down to individual companies' profit margins, how much money they want to make, and what you can find is that by shopping around, once a year, once every 2 years, maybe even more frequently, you'll find that you can really, really get the best value for your money. So in recent years, prices have fallen, some areas more than others, which I'll touch on later in the slide, but there's been a lot of reductions, and it really does pay to actually look into the prices that you are currently paying. On a side note, a lot of people that are using BT may also be with a company called BT Local Business. They are actually, in essence, a fourth-party reseller of BT Openreach. So they go to BT Retail just as a consumer would. They buy the lines, probably get a bit of a better deal than your average Joe, as they're obviously buying in a bit more bulk, but they're still buying at the price that BT Retail would sell, and if they have a fault, they need to log it with BT Retail, who then go back to BT Openreach to come out and fix it. So again, this is a company that will go out and use the name BT, but quite often you won't receive the same sort of response times or prices that you can get elsewhere. So it's very important that if this is something that hasn't been reviewed and you're kind of stuck with the stigma of I'm using BT, I'm using BT, I'm happy with them, I'd suggest just have a look at it. You may find that you're on a great deal, and that, that can often be the case, but without looking, you just don't know. So that's definitely an area that I would address. Next up, the mobile termination rate. Sounds a little bit daunting, sounds very technical. Actually, it's a pretty simple concept that's coming in the last sort of 12 to 18 months, and it's actually as a result of some Ofcom regulations that have come into place. So the mobile termination rate is in essence a minutely connection charge that was being applied by the mobile networks when making a call from a landline to a mobile, and actually explained the difference between the price of a landline to landline call and a landline to mobile rate. Now, I don't know how many of you guys have actually looked at your phone bills in the past, but you've probably noticed, if you have, that you pay, it could be anywhere 3, 4, 5 times as much, sometimes even more, for a landline to mobile call as opposed to a landline to landline call. The main reason for this is the mobile termination rate, and as I said, this is a minutely connection charge applied by the mobile networks such as O2, Vodafone, EE, and Virgin when they were around. So I'm just going to explain how a landline to mobile call actually works and where this rate kicks in, so you can fully understand how you can make the savings that are available. If you imagine you pick up your phone now and you dial your friend, you put in their mobile number, your phone goes straight down to your telephone system. From there, the call is routed out to the BT exchange, which is where your line connects, and it says, right, okay, which network do my provider currently use? So there's a number of different networks in the country. Different providers will actually use different networks to route their calls because they get much better deals to different destinations, and also, some networks can provide better quality than others. So at this point, your landline network will be searching for the call, and it will say, right, I'm dialing let's say a Vodafone number here, so let's connect to the Vodafone network. Let's jump across there and make them route me down to the person's mobile. Now, when the call connects from the landline network, such as Opal, BT, Gamma, etc., to a mobile network, that is where the mobile termination rate kicks in. And as I said, this is every minute you'll be paying a big chunk of your minutely rate for a landline to mobile call will simply be made up of this mobile termination rate. So around 12 to 18 months ago, Ofcom stepped in and they said, look, we've got this rate, it's really forcing up the price of a landline to mobile call. It's excessive in the charge that's being applied, but actually it's also unnecessary, and really it's just the way that the mobile networks are making more money, as a bit of a side venture. So what they've done is they've said this needs to be reduced, and it's actually quite significant initial reductions. It was by around about 40%, but from there it's going to continue to come down over the next few years until it's completely eradicated. So they didn't wipe it all out in one go, as the mobile networks will be losing quite a bit of money, but they're bringing it down gradually. So as I said, if you've not actually reviewed your landline telephony for, certainly in the last 12 months, you'd probably be quite shocked at how much you can save on your landline to mobile calls. I mean, just to give you an idea, before this came out, you would have been looking at around about the sort of 8, 9, 10 pence per minute mark for a landline to mobile call. But in actual fact now, some companies are actually able to offer out under 3 pence per minute, and in exceptional circumstances, even less. So this really has come down, and it will continue to fall until landline to mobile calls are more or less on the same par as a landline to landline call, and you're looking at under 1 penny per minute. As well as that, there's a number of other areas where the industry's seen reductions, and they typically, contrary to popular belief, they come down in the opposite way to the gas and electric, where they seem to keep rising. Landline telephony really has fallen year upon year upon year, and again, this is another reason why it's absolutely paramount that it's something that's in your regular annually reviews. Moving on from there, there's a number of things that you should really look for in a supplier. So when you're going out to market, I realise that price is obviously a driving factor and everybody wants to get the best deal, but sometimes you need to look at it and say, well, okay, company A can offer me cheaper than company B, but really what more are they going to provide me than just this initial cost saving? I look at it in a very similar way as if you were having a bathroom put in or getting an extension on your house. You wouldn't necessarily always go with the cheapest provider, because you've got to ask why. Why are they able to offer so much cheaper than everybody else? What does this really entail? So there's a number of things that I'd look out for when I'm actually looking at a prospective supplier. One of the most important ones being a regular rate review. It's all well and good a company coming in and saying, right, we'll offer you, this great rate, and it's absolutely fantastic. We'll save you a lot of money. But what they don't say is this is tying you into a 2, 3, we even see 5-year contracts. But if your rate isn't going to be reviewed during that period, you may get the initial savings, and then you'll find that at the end of the term, you're actually paying 30, 40, sometimes 50% too much money on your landline bills. So a regular review is an absolutely fantastic way of making sure that when you're with your supplier, how am I going to make sure that you're going to keep me on the best deal and not just actually, either put my prices up or just keep me where I am. So that's something that I would always ask for to be built into your contract. Please can you review my call charges and line rentals every 6 months. And any good supplier should offer you that, because they know that their rates will drop, and it's in their interest, because at the end of the contract, if you're happy with their service, you're still on competitive prices, chances are you will be staying with them. Something else that's very important as well is per second billing. Now, it may seem, like something that's pretty nonchalant, but if you imagine that you're making thousands of calls per month, and they're all being rounded up to the nearest minute, you're going to pay a lot more money than you need to. If you're looking at a lot of mobile calls at around the sort of 3 or 4 pence per minute mark, and you call a mobile, you go to voicemail, after 3 seconds you hang up because you think, no, I'm not going to leave voicemail for them, I'll call them back. If you're paying a minute for that call, a minutely rate, that's going to actually push your bill up quite a lot throughout the month if that's happening on every single call. So per second billing is something that every provider can actually supply you with, but some won't look to do it. So it's a question that I would always ask: are your call charges billed per second? And on a very similar note, are they billed to 3 decimal places? This is something else that's quite important, again, because if every call is being rounded up to the nearest penny or nearest tenth of a penny, you may find that over the course of a month you're going to actually look at spending a lot more money. So I would always ask for 3 decimal places on your call charge billing, simply so that you make sure you're only paying for what you're using and you're not actually just being rounded up and spending a lot more money over the course of your month and your year with that. Onto a more sort of service side of things, a dedicated account manager is something that I can't stress highly enough. I'm sure you've all experienced it at home when you have an issue with your Sky or any other service that you have at home, and all you want is just a quick answer. Your insurance company have put your price up and you just want to know why. And there's nothing more frustrating than calling up, getting an automated service where you have to speak into it and feel like a bit of an idiot at the time, or alternatively wait for all the options and select the right one. When you finally get through to somebody, they could be based elsewhere, they could be in the wrong department, and you get passed from pillar to post until you get to the right person. So that's something that I would always ask for from a prospective supplier is, do you supply dedicated account managers? Can I have their direct line, so if I have an issue, I can call straight up and I can say, hi John Smith, how are you doing? We've got this issue, or we'd actually like to look at potentially adding this service to our bill. Can you help with that? You get straight to the person who looks after you, and any issues, that there's someone there on the end of the phone, even if it's just to let out a bit of steam out, if nothing else. And then finally, a good reputation. As I said, it's not all about getting the cheapest price. Whilst that is a massive driving factor, what you really want to know is, who are the company that I'm using? How long have they been around? There's out of the 5,000 resellers, I think there's around 80% that have been around for less than 10 years. And within those, actually, a good 70% of those have less than 10 office-based staff. Now, whilst it might feel great to have a real personable approach to your telephony, what you can struggle with in that situation is if somebody goes off on holiday or have some unexpected leave for a period of time, they leave the company, things can be thrown into disarray a little bit, and you can find that service can dip as a result. So I would always ask, before signing any contracts with a supplier, can I have a reference? In your guys' situation, I'd be saying, how many other schools do you have on your books? Are there any that are near us that you may already know? Alternatively, can you provide me with the name of some other bursars that I can just call up, have a chat with, and just find out exactly how they found not only the transfer to you guys, but also your ongoing service and what they've been like as a supplier. And that's something that I couldn't stress highly enough. These are all good things that you can look out for. Another one could be that, how many networks does the supplier use as well? This is something I've not put on the slide, but I mentioned with the landline to mobile calls, as a call leaves the exchange, it will get routed via a landline network. So a number of suppliers out there will use more than one network, and the benefit of that is that not only can they bespoke your plan and look at, where are we spending the money, where do our calls go? You've used Opal network. They may be fantastic for international calls, but there's no point in offering me a really good rate to Germany if all my calls stay within the UK. So you get the benefit of bespoke plans that will actually be tailored to your needs, but also if for whatever reason there's an issue with the network, all customers can be transferred across to another one. So this is something that I would ask, do you use more than one network? Moving on to the things that you should certainly look out for when you're looking for a supplier, I would always ask the minutely rates that you're quoting me, do they involve connection charges, minimum call charges, or any other hidden fees? Now when I say a connection charge or a minimum call charge, you've probably seen it in the past with old mobile contracts before you have bundle minutes. If you make a call to somebody, you may be on the phone for 1 second, but straight away you could be paying 7p for that call. So this is something that, again, is very important. As I said, with the per second billing, it ensures that you're actually only paying for what you're using. You're not finding yourself with initial setup fees for your calls, making lots of short duration ones, but actually your rate is coming out twice the minutely rate that you were initially quoted when you signed up to your contract. On top of this, again, per minute billing is something that I would certainly look out for, because you don't want to be rounded up to the nearest minute every time that you go 1 second over it and you hang up the phone. And you really would be amazed how much this can actually add on at the end of your contract. And then finally, you've got the call bundle plans, which is something which can seem like a good idea. You see them a lot with your mobile contracts, but I wouldn't mind betting if you were to actually look at your plan, and you might be allocated 1,200 minutes, 5,000 minutes, but the way that it works is you typically need to use the exact amount of minutes on offer for it to be cost effective. Sometimes even then it's not. But if you use less, you're not getting your money's worth, and if you use more, you'll often go onto an expensive minutely tariff after that bundle. So that's something that I would certainly review. Even if they offer you a plan which sounds fantastic to the amount of minutes that you currently use, you never know if you're going to start using less or using more, at which case, at which time it will become not very effective. So again, I would always look at your per second billing as opposed to any sort of bundle plans. Lengthy rollover notice periods are something we see quite often. There are a number of suppliers out there that do have these. So whilst they might say, okay, we'll put you onto a 12-month contract, what they might not tell you is that there's a 6-month notice period out there. So if you do not give notice more than 6 months before the end of the contract, and not many people will actually think, well, look, I need to look at this now because I've got 7 months left, you may actually be rolled into a new term of 12 months, effectively making it a 24-month term, because you weren't aware of this notice period. So I would always ask, how long is your notice period? Will it roll over, or will I just enter a 30-day agreement at the end of my contract? Because that's something that's very, very important. Again, with this, I've actually seen previously a company out there that had a 3-year contract with a 3-year notice period. So if you didn't provide notice on the day that you signed up to the contract, you were in a new contract straight away, and it's effectively a 6-year term at that point. So I would absolutely stress, before you sign anything, just ask the question, how long is notice? Will it roll over at the end, or will I just go into a 30-day agreement? And then finally, something that I've touched on already is providers with less than 10 employees. Absolutely look at this, ask them how many people work for them. It's not something that I would use as a definitive thing that you should rule out, but just be aware, if a company is of a very small size, you could be affected if somebody is to leave them or anything else along those lines. That pretty much covers most of the things that you should really look for in a provider. Obviously, there could be personal issues that you've had in the past that you really wouldn't want to go through again. If so, it's just things that it's about asking the question before you agree to anything. Just ask every single question that you could possibly think of under the sun, get them out there. And as I said, if you ask along the lines of for a reference, you should be steered in the right direction, because people generally don't sing from the rooftops for a company that they weren't too happy with at some point in time. That pretty much brings us to the end of it. So just to recap on there, what exactly have we covered? I mean, we've dispelled, as I said, the myth of BT. Hopefully, a lot of you may have actually realised the situation with OpenReach already, but hopefully this gives you a better understanding of exactly who OpenReach are, who BT Retail are, and where they compare to all the other resellers in the market. And if you take nothing else from it, I would just take an open mind as to say, if somebody is to approach you and you're currently using BT, don't rule them out because they're not BT. Give them a chance. You may find that they can't match what you're on, but certainly take a look at it, because typically with BT, prices can be a lot higher because they use their brand name to their advantage in that effect. Secondly, we looked at saving the money on your calls. The main area at the moment, and it really is the hot point in the industry, it's been all over newspapers, is the mobile termination rate, and this is really quite groundbreaking. When this was introduced by Ofcom, it was something within the industry that was a real buzz, and it was, let's get out there, let's talk to everybody that we can think of and let them know that this is coming down, because this is bringing people's bills down from £1,000 a month to £400 a month quite comfortably, because, you know, the way that the world is going now, most people that you want to talk to, and I suppose this is especially sort of prominent in with schools, is a lot of your calls will be to mobile numbers, simply because that's how people want to be contacted. You know, they generally don't give out their home landline. They'll give out their mobile. If you need me, if there's any issue with my child, contact me on this number. So I would say this is an area, especially with schools, where you can save a huge amount of money. And finally, we looked at choosing the right supplier. What is it that I should look for in a supplier? Why should I go with them? And, you know, are they the right guys for me? I hope this was informative, and I hope that you've taken away some points from it and that this can be of some benefit. And now I'll hand you back to Lorraine, as I believe she's got a case study to run through with you guys.
That's brilliant. Many thanks indeed, Michael. That was fantastic. Yes, just as Michael says, just got a little case study to quickly go through now, just to explain a little bit about how we do it here at Minerva. The information on the next slide that I'll come to was what we used to prepare a request for proposal, and we sent that to 4 suppliers, including the incumbent supplier. We're always keen to ensure that the incumbent supplier has the opportunity to potentially reduce their pricing, if that's possible, you know, in order to keep their client, because the reality is that we don't want to break relationships between suppliers and the schools unless, you know, unless we feel we have to. The details that we provide in the request for proposal ask for all sorts of things, many of, you know, well, in fact, everything that Michael has just covered on his presentation. So things like, you know, the types of calls, you know, how many calls are made, the duration of them. And then we ask them to provide, the selected firms to provide their pricing based on the school's usage on a like-for-like basis. And that's very key, because with every procurement project that we do, we must ensure that we're doing a like-for-like comparison. That way, you know, we know for sure that we're comparing apples with apples. Should there be an opportunity for suppliers to quote for systems and handsets, then that's when obviously that opportunity presents itself as well. And again, as Michael has talked about earlier, part of our considerations is around service, and that's done from taking references from the supplier's customers. We take it a little step further. We do look at suppliers' financials to look at their sort of security from a financial perspective. Probably isn't the case in this instance, but if we believe that people are going to be going onto school sites, you know, to do maintenance, for example, then we'd also ask for things like DBS clearances and that sort of thing. So, you know, it's a pretty robust review that we undertake. So this is just a particular school that we worked with. It's a fairly typical sort of school. It's a prep school. It's about 350 pupils, and over a 12-month period, their total spend on line rental and calls was just over £3,000. We didn't review special and satellite calls. It was just too complicated to do that, and sometimes it's very difficult to tell what those calls actually relate to. So what it meant was that overall we assessed 100% of the line rental cost and 74.87% of the call charges. You can be pretty safe that as long as you're benchmarking about 25% plus of your spend, that the information that you get off the back of it will be pretty robust. We also looked at mobiles for this particular school, and they were spending just over £2,000 on mobile contracts, and along with the rental cost, you know, there were fees for, you know, potentially fees for new handsets. That can be avoided by keeping the old handsets or having basic mobiles. It really depends on who's using them. You know, as an example, in this particular school, you know, one of the people that had a mobile was the maintenance manager. Well, he actually really wanted to have a pretty basic phone because he was out and about, and the chances of him dropping it were much higher. And so a basic mobile was all he really needed. Now, in this particular instance, the school made so much savings on their mobile on their mobiles contracts, that they actually end up buying some new smartphone handsets and upgrading, and used it as an opportunity to audit who had phones in the school and who hadn't. So in fact, it was interesting because in the end, rather than saving money, they decided to spend the same amount, but they've got much, much more for their money. So in terms of the figures of the savings, you'll see here that from a calls and lines perspective, there was some pretty good savings there, equating to just over 35%, and the mobiles was very significant, as you can see, over a 70% saving on what they were currently paying, which is just goes to show why it's so important to get these things reviewed. A couple of things that are worth mentioning to keep an eye out for. Fraudulent calls, we do see them happening more regularly. If you don't get support from your suppliers, it can be easy for these fraudulent calls to be made. And one school we're aware of, had 325 calls made, costing them over £1,700. It is something that, as I say, the suppliers can help you with. So if you think that could be an issue for you, I would suggest you do speak to your supplier about what they can do in that regard. And then just silly little things like the directory inquiries and the speaking clock. I mean, they're so expensive. Why anyone in this day and age would need to ring the speaking clock, I have no idea. And even directory inquiries, with the advent now of free directories on the internet, there shouldn't ever be a reason for someone to need to ring directory inquiries. And again, your supplier should be able to put a stop on a block on those particular numbers to prevent people from calling them. So that's the end of our little presentation and case study. I have had a couple of questions come in. So Michael, if you wanted to just rejoin us. One of the questions that I've had is how long does it take to transfer calls and lines to a new company? So if someone was looking to transfer, what's the sort of rough timescales of how long it would take?
Oh, it's a good question, actually. Typically, if you're out of contract with your supplier, you're free to leave them. It's a very seamless process, which should take, in total, around about 30 days. I mean, the situation is that you provide notice. Quite often the actual new supplier will do this for you, but whoever it is, you provide notice to the supplier. Typically, most people want 30 days. Once that's been honoured, that will be the date that you're free to move. So the typical process is that you yourself or your new supplier gives them the notice. At that point they say, okay, Mr. Smith, you're providing me notice on the 1st of October. We will relinquish the lines and they will be with your new supplier by the 1st of November. Sometimes it can be even sooner, if they're happy to let you go at that point.
Brilliant. And there is one thing that's worth mentioning as well from our experience is that there is some, BT do have to write to the school, don't they, to actually confirm that the transfer is valid. I know somebody had a letter and said, well, why are BT writing to me? And it's basically to ensure that there isn't a sort of fraudulent transfer of the contract. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So every time that a transfer order is placed, BT will make contact with the customer. It's almost always in writing, just to ensure that you have actually authorised this. And the peace of mind that you can really take from that as well is that a lot of people get a little bit tetchy when they're nearing a point of decision, thinking, I think the supplier might just try and take my lines. Well, if they do try and take it, it won't happen without your permission to BT Openreach at that point to say, yes, I'm happy for them to take over my line rentals.
Brilliant. Another question, which is another good one, will our services be affected when the transfer happens? So I guess people are fearful here, what happens? Are we going to be without phones at any point? Does it have to be done over a weekend because of that? Or, how sort of smooth is the process?
No, I mean, it's absolutely seamless. So, for instance, we could be on the phone right now. I'm making this call using one supplier. It's being billed by them. The transfer actually happens while we're on the phone. And I put the phone down, pick up and make another call, and that's billed by my new supplier. It's literally that seamless. All that actually happens is a BT Openreach engineer goes down to the little green box on the road. He changes the code that's attached to your line to say, please put this, all our calls through company A. He changes over the number to company B's, and at that point, any call that goes through their networks, and it's billed by them. So the only difference that you'll notice is when your bills stop coming from your incumbent and they start coming from your new supplier.
Brilliant. And then one final question. And again, I've been asked this several times, so I think it's something that, is definitely of interest to everybody that will be on this webinar. Is it beneficial or is it necessary, which I suppose is two different questions really, to have all your calls, lines, systems and mobiles with one company, or can you have them split across, 4 different companies? What's the sort of best practice when it comes to that?
I would say best practice kind of boils down to how happy you are with each supplier's proposals. I certainly wouldn't be looking at it and saying, right, they're costing me more on my mobiles, but because I like this company's landline services, I'll bring it all under the same roof. It's something that you can absolutely have split. You won't see any difference in terms of service because the system and the lines are two very different things. And if you was to ever experience a line or a system's fault, your incumbent supplier could find out whilst you're on the phone to them if it was a line or a system. So for argument's sake, if somebody was to call us up and say, right, I have my lines are down, we can, from the office, using the BCO from each gateway, we can send a signal down the line, and if that signal comes back to us with no problems, we can say, okay, this is not a line fault because there's no break in the line anywhere, it's come straight back. If it if it doesn't reach the system, we know at that point that there's a line fault. So you won't receive any benefit from having one supplier for everything, other than that you've got one point of call, if you wanted to make any changes, but it's absolutely not imperative, no.
And I guess potentially from, speaking as a supplier, would I be right in saying that that a school is likely to perhaps get a more attractive proposal overall from a cost perspective if they do have everything with you?
I can only speak from our point of view. It wouldn't be with us. We have our prices for landlines, we have our prices for mobiles, we have it for broadband, and really the way that we'd rather work is, we don't want to kind of jeopardise a potential relationship by saying, well, we will give you a better price if you do this for us. It's really a case of offering out, best prices available really. Some suppliers might do it, but I wouldn't say that it's the norm. No.
Brilliant. Well, look, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Michael. That has been incredibly informative. I've learned something this afternoon, and I do hope that the people that are on the webinar have also done so. As I mentioned earlier, we will be, making the recording of this available to people. And obviously, if you do have any questions, my email address is just come up on there, or do give us a call, and we'd be happy to answer any additional questions you have. Other than that, I hope you've all managed to eat your sandwiches while we've been on the webinar, and look forward to you joining us again hopefully next month, where we'll be talking about cleaning, the joys of cleaning. So yes, thanks very much again, and have a good afternoon.